The fire was still burning in King's Landing when Jon Snow stood quietly on the steps of the Red Keep. Smoke rose into the sky like a curse. Ashes fell like snow covering his black cloak. The streets behind him were filled with screams and silence, the silence of the dead. Daenerys had done what no king or queen before her dared. She had burned the city down. Innocents, children, mothers, soldiers. Bells had rung for surrender, but her dragon did not stop. Jon's heart was broken. He looked at her walking ahead, tall and proud like she had won something. Behind her, unsullied soldiers followed like shadows. Grey Worm had already executed surrendered Lannister soldiers. There was no mercy left in this war, but something deep inside Jon whispered, "It doesn't have to end like this." What if he had acted sooner? What if he had chosen family before queen? What if he had done the right thing, not the honorable thing, but the right thing? He had the chance once before all of this. A vision, a dream, maybe something more. He had seen Ned Stark in chains, Robb's body pierced by arrows, Robert Baratheon lying on his bed, poisoned slowly by his own wine. He had seen it all before it happened, like the gods were warning him. Back then, Jon didn't understand it, but now it all made sense. He had one more chance. The whispers of the old gods were still in the wind. Jon closed his eyes, placed a hand on his sword, not the sword of the Night's Watch anymore, but something more ancient. A blade once touched by fire and snow. A blade that could cut through fate, and then the world shifted. He opened his eyes in Winterfell, but it wasn't the same Winterfell that had been burned and broken. No, this was before. Years ago, he smelled the cold wind. He heard Robb Stark laughing in the courtyard, practicing sword swings. He heard Arya shouting from the roof. Sansa and Septa Mordane were walking in the garden. And there, standing tall, proud and full of strength, was Lord Eddard Stark, his father, or at least the man who raised him like a son. Jon almost dropped to his knees. The gods had given him another chance, a way to stop everything before it began. But there was no time to waste. He ran to the Great Hall, pushing through surprised guards. Everyone looked at him like he had lost his mind. "Jon?" Robb blinked, wiping sweat from his brow. "What's going on, brother?" Jon grabbed Robb's arm. "We have to talk to Father now. Something is coming. Everything's about to change." Later that evening, Jon sat before Ned Stark. The Lord of Winterfell listened quietly as Jon explained everything. The war, the Targaryens, the dragons, Daenerys' madness, King's Landing in flames, and even the truth of Jon's own birth, that he was Aegon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar and Lyanna Stark. Ned's face was stone, but Jon saw the pain in his eyes when he spoke of Lyanna. "Why should I believe any of this?" Ned asked finally. "Because you know it's true," Jon said, his voice quiet. "You carried the secret all these years. You raised me as your own to protect me, and now we can change everything." Ned sat back. The fire crackled in the hall. "And what do you want, Jon?" "I want to save our family. I want to stop the war before it begins. I want to stop Robert from killing the last of the Targaryens. I want to stop Robb from marching south to die. I want to stop you from going to King's Landing. I want to stop Daenerys from burning the world." Ned nodded slowly. "Then we must ride to King's Landing," he said, "before Robert does something foolish." And so the ride began. Jon Snow, Robb Stark, and Ned Stark, heading south not for war, but to stop one. But fate is not so easily rewritten. Waiting in the capital was Robert Baratheon, king, drunk, and angry. And in the shadows of the Red Keep, Varys and Littlefinger were already spinning their webs. And far across the sea, Daenerys Targaryen had just received her dragon eggs. Jon had changed the past, but would the future obey? The journey to King's Landing was long and filled with questions Jon could barely answer. Robb rode beside him, quiet at first, but his curiosity kept breaking through. "You're telling me that dragons return?" "Real ones." Jon nodded. "3 of them. And they'll burn cities to ash. And you said Daenerys Targaryen, the last one across the narrow sea. She's the one who brings them." "She believes it's her destiny," Jon said, staring ahead. "But destiny means nothing if it burns everything in its path." Ned rode slightly ahead, his jaw set in stone. He didn't speak much during the ride, but Jon knew his mind was racing. The man who had carried a lie for nearly 2 decades was now hearing truths more dangerous than any lie. Jon had tried not to overwhelm him, but how could he explain everything at once? The White Walkers, the Wall falling, the Night King, Bran becoming something not quite human, Sansa and Arya forced into pain and blood, Daenerys, the breaker of chains, becoming the bringer of fire and death, and the worst truth of all, that Jon, the bastard of Winterfell, was the heir to it all. No, he wasn't ready to speak of thrones. He only wanted to prevent blood from staining the snow. They arrived in King's Landing after 10 days of hard riding. The gates opened for Lord Stark, Warden of the North, and his sons. King Robert was already 3 goblets deep into wine when they entered the great hall. "Stark!" he roared, rising from his seat, arms open. "About time! I was about to send the Bloody Mountain to drag you here." Ned bowed slightly. "Your Grace." Robert rushed forward, hugging him roughly. "You look older, and you've brought your boys." He eyed Robb, who stood tall and proud, then Jon, who remained quiet. "You've grown." Robert narrowed his eyes at Jon. "Still brooding like your father?" Jon gave a short nod. Robert laughed. 7 hells! You could pass for a Targaryen with that hair." Jon's eyes flickered for a moment. A strange chill ran through him. Robert didn't know how right he was. Later, Jon pulled Ned aside. "You have to tell him." "About me?" Ned shook his head. "Not yet. You don't know Robert like I do. He'll hear Targaryen and see nothing but the past, rage, war, Lyanna's death. But that's exactly why we need him to listen," Jon said. "Daenerys is the one we must stop, not because she's a Targaryen, but because she's the wrong one. She'll destroy everything, but Robert won't see that if we keep hiding the truth." Ned looked away. "You are asking me to risk a kingdom for a chance. I'm asking you to risk it for peace." That night, Robert called a private council. Ned, Robert, Jon, and Sir Barristan Selmy sat in the royal chamber. Robert looked restless, pacing as Ned explained the situation, carefully, without naming Jon yet. "We've received whispers," Ned said. "Daenerys Targaryen has married Khal Drogo. If they unite the Dothraki with her bloodline, it could mean war." Robert scoffed. "Let them come. We'll kill them like we killed her father." Jon stepped forward. "You didn't kill her father. Jaime did. You just took the throne." Robert's eyes darkened. "And who are you to speak to your king like that?" Jon met his gaze. "Someone who has seen what happens when fire is left to grow." The room fell silent. "You think I should kill her now, before she crosses the sea?" Robert asked. "No," Jon said. "You should offer her peace." Robert laughed, a bitter, rough sound. "Peace with a Targaryen? You sound like a madman." But Sir Barristan leaned forward. "Your Grace, if I may, perhaps the boy is right. Killing a girl before she's even raised a blade may invite more rebellion than it prevents." Robert's eyes flicked between them all. "Fine," he muttered. "We'll send someone, a letter. She'll ignore it." "Not if I go," Jon said. Ned turned sharply. "No, absolutely not." Jon looked at both of them. "Let me go across the sea. I know what's coming. I know how she thinks. I can reach her, maybe before the dragons hatch, maybe before blood is spilled." Robert poured another goblet of wine. "And if she sees through your lies?" Jon didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence told them everything. That night Ned walked the halls of the Red Keep. Troubled, he passed the throne room. The Iron Throne sat in the dark, cold and cruel, and in the shadows near it stood Littlefinger, smiling faintly, always listening. The game had begun, but it was no longer the one they knew, because Jon Snow had changed the board, and somewhere far across the sea, Daenerys Targaryen had just felt something shift in her bones, as if a storm was coming for her. The salt air stung Jon's face as the ship cut across the narrow sea, waves crashing like the warnings in his dreams. He stood alone at the bow, his hand resting on the hilt of Longclaw. The wolf's head on the pommel reminded him who he was, and who he wasn't. He wasn't a Stark, not truly. He wasn't a Targaryen either, not in his heart. He was caught in between, a bastard of two worlds, sent now to meet the last dragon before she grew her wings. Behind him, Sir Jorah Mormont stood silent. The disgraced knight had agreed to guide him to Daenerys. Jon had spoken carefully when asking for help in King's Landing. Jorah still believed in honor, in second chances. And he still believed in the silver-haired girl he once swore to protect. She won't listen, Jorah said quietly. Not easily. She's surrounded by voices whispering about thrones and revenge. Jon turned. Then I'll speak louder. In Vice Dothrak, Daenerys Targaryen sat atop a hill, watching her new husband train with his blood riders. Drogo moved like death in motion, quick, brutal, and fearless. The Dothraki adored him, but they did not yet adore her. She felt small here, out of place. The language was strange, the food harsh, the customs cruel. But the dragon eggs whispered to her at night when her handmaiden brought news that a Westerosi man had arrived, claiming to have a warning and a royal bloodline. She was curious but cautious. "What's his name?" she asked. "Jon Snow." She didn't know the name. But she allowed him to come before her. The tent was quiet when he entered. She sat on a throne of woven grass and bone. Her silver-blonde hair fell down her shoulders. Her violet eyes studied him with curiosity and coldness. "You don't kneel," she said. "I kneel for those who don't burn cities," Jon answered. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "Who are you?" "My name is Jon Snow. I was born Aegon Targaryen. My mother was Lyanna Stark. My father was Rhaegar, your brother. For a moment there was only the sound of wind outside. You lie." "No. I came here to stop blood from being spilled. Yours and ours. If you keep walking the path you're on, you'll bring fire to the world. And the world will drown in it." She rose slowly. "You come to my camp, speak of doom, and dare to name yourself as kin? Aegon died in the sack of King's Landing. No, the child who died was not me. Rhaegar sent me away before the fall. My mother died giving birth to me in the Tower of Joy. Your brother believed in prophecy. He believed his child would bring balance." "Prophecy," she said bitterly. "So many have died because of prophecy." Jon took a step forward, his voice firm. "Then let's end it. Right here, I don't want a crown. I don't want a war. I came to show you another path, before it's too late." She looked him over slowly, as if trying to see the truth in his skin, his hair, his eyes. "Prove it." Jon reached into the pouch at his side and removed a scroll. A letter from Ned Stark, sealed with the direwolf of Winterfell. A confession. A truth that had never left his lips, until now. She read it slowly. Her hands trembled when she reached the part about Rhaegar, about Lyanna, about the child named Aegon. When she looked up, there was fire in her eyes, but not rage. Pain. "They lied to me," she whispered. "All of them. No more lies," Jon said. "But you still have a choice. Will you be the breaker of chains, or the bringer of ash?" Silence stretched between them. Then she said, "And what do you want, cousin?" Jon looked her in the eye. "To save the people you're meant to rule, not burn them." That night, the Dothraki murmured about the pale man who stood eye to eye with the Khaleesi. Some said he was a ghost. Others said he had no fear. Even Drogo noticed her silence when Jon left the tent. He asked her, "Shall I kill him?" "No," she said. "Not yet." She placed her hand on the dragon eggs that sat in the fire pit. They were warm now. Too warm. The blood of the dragon was awake, but so was something else. Back in King's Landing, Robert Baratheon stared at the Raven's scroll that had just arrived. His hands were shaking, though he tried to hide it. "Aegon lives," he whispered. Ned stood beside him. "And he carries no claim to your throne. Only a warning." Robert turned away, walking toward the window. "If he's truly Rhaegar's son, then I should kill him." "You already tried," Ned said coldly. "And the gods stopped you," Robert turned sharply. "So what now? We trust Targaryens again?" Ned looked him in the eye. "No, we trust Jon Snow." But Littlefinger, listening in the shadows again, whispered to himself, "Let the Targaryens tear each other apart. I'll pick up the crown from their ashes." The next morning, Daenerys stood barefoot before the fire pit, staring at the dragon eggs. She hadn't slept. Jon Snow's words haunted her. His voice, calm but unyielding, echoed through her bones. If what he said was true, if he was Aegon, her nephew, then everything changed. But truth wasn't enough. Truth didn't make people follow you. Power did. Still she hesitated. "Khaleesi," Jorah said, stepping inside the tent. "He's ready to leave. He says he's delivered what he came for." She didn't respond for a long moment. Then she turned. "Follow him." Jorah raised an eyebrow. "Make sure he lives," she said quietly. "I haven't decided what to believe yet." Jon rode east with a small group of Dothraki scouts, a show of peace. He had done what he came for, but he wasn't sure if it had changed anything. The truth alone rarely changed the world. It was the choices after that did. Jorah caught up to him on the second day. "She didn't kill you," he said with a dry chuckle. "That's a good start." Jon gave a slight smile, but it faded quickly. "She's not who I hoped she'd be, but maybe not who I feared either." "She's both," Jorah said. "Like fire, warm in one moment, deadly in the next." Jon glanced at him. "And you? You still love her?" Jorah didn't answer. He just looked ahead, enough to want her to become something better. Jon respected that. He only wished Daenerys wanted the same for herself. Back in King's Landing, Ned Stark stood on the balcony of the Tower of the Hand, watching the city below. Smoke curled from chimneys. Bells rang softly in the distance. The capital was quiet, but the quiet felt wrong, like the calm before a storm. Inside, Robert was pacing, furious, paranoid. "Aegon, Rhaegar's son," he muttered. "You knew, didn't you? All these years." Ned didn't deny it. "I swore an oath. To your sister." Robert slammed his fist into the table. "You lied to your king." "I protected your kingdom." That shut Robert up. Ned stepped forward. If Jon had wanted the throne, he would have taken it already. "He's not like his father." Robert's eyes narrowed. "And what about the girl?" "His aunt, Daenerys." "She listens to him," Ned said. "Maybe that's our only chance." Robert stared out the window. "One Targaryen is too many." "But two?" Silence. Then he said, "We prepare for war." In the shadows of the Red Keep, Petyr Baelish moved like a spider in a web of lies. He smiled as he passed the throne room, where no one sat, yet Varys watched him from the opposite hall. "You look like a man who smells blood," the spider said quietly. Littlefinger smirked. "I always do." "You want chaos." "No," Littlefinger whispered. "I want opportunity." Varys leaned in. "And what happens when fire and ice join hands?" Littlefinger's eyes sparkled. "Then I wait for the steam to clear and strike." Across the sea, Daenerys stood before the flames once more. This time, she stepped into them. The fire danced along her skin like water. Her hair blew wild in the heat. The dragon eggs cracked, the sound echoing like thunder. Through the night, one egg broke. Open, a tiny wing unfolded, then another, and then the scream of the first dragon since the doom of Valyria pierced the sky. Khal Drogo and his riders ran to her and stopped in awe. She emerged from the fire, naked, unburnt, and holding life in her arms. The Dothraki dropped to their knees. "Blood of my blood," Drogo whispered, but Daenerys' eyes weren't on him. They were fixed, on the sky, on the stars above. Westeros Jon Snow's warning had changed. Something inside her, but not in the way he hoped. "I won't be the bringer of ash," she said to the night, "but I will take what's mine. Fire may destroy, but it also purifies." The dragons hissed in her arms. Jon felt it in his sleep, a deep burning pull in his chest, like a storm had broken open across the sea. He sat up, gasping. Jorah was already awake, staring into the dark. "What is it?" Jon asked. "Something's changed," Jorah said. Jon looked at the sky. It was darker than before, as if the stars themselves were hiding. King's Landing wore a mask of peace, but inside the Red Keep, steel was sharpening. Robert Baratheon stood in the council chamber, a goblet of wine trembling in his hand. The lords around him whispered, "Renly, Stannis, Varys, Littlefinger." Only Ned remained silent. "We strike now," Robert barked, slamming the goblet down, wine splashing like blood. "Before they hatch more dragons. Before they breed." "She's just a girl," Ned said. "And Jon, he's trying to stop war, not start one." Stannis scoffed. He's a Targaryen. They don't stop wars. They start them. It's in their blood. Renly leaned forward. So we kill them both, then? A boy who came in peace, and a girl still across the sea? Littlefinger smiled faintly. We've killed for less. Ned turned to Robert. You swore to protect the realm, not burn it out of fear. I'm protecting it, Robert roared. They'll come. With dragons, with Dothraki, with fire and old madness in their veins. You were once brothers with Rhaegar, Ned said quietly. Before the crown poisoned your memory. That silenced the room. Robert turned away, breathing hard. Send the assassins, he muttered, but Ned stepped forward. If you do this, I'm done. I will not be a hand to a butcher. Robert looked at him, pain behind the fury. Then go back to your cold castle, and pray they don't fly over your walls. Ned left the chamber without a bow. Varys watched him go, expression unreadable. And Littlefinger? He was already planning the funeral. Jon and Jorah reached the docks of Pentos, where a ship waited to take them back to Westeros. But Jon stood still at the edge of the sea, looking back east. He felt it, a tremble in the world. Something ancient had returned. He turned to Jorah. She's done it, hasn't she? Jorah nodded. The dragons live. Jon closed his eyes. Then the war's already begun. Daenerys rode with Drogo now, not behind him, beside him. The dragonlings nestled in cages of bronze, fed raw meat, watched by the Dothraki with wide, fearful eyes. They were growing fast. Khal Drogo had promised her the Iron Throne as a wedding gift. Now, with fire in her blood and a cause in her heart, she was ready to claim it, but not through peace. She remembered Jon Snow's face, his warning, his truth. She would not forget it, but she would not obey it either. He wanted to spare Westeros from fire, but fire was the only language kings understood. In Winterfell, Robb Stark stood at the godswood, staring at the weirwood tree, its red leaves falling like drops of blood. Arya sat beside him, silent for once. Sansa stood farther back, unsure whether to join them. Robb finally spoke. Father is in danger, Arya nodded. He told the truth. And now the king wants to silence him. Sansa looked confused. But he's the hand. They can't just... They can, Robb said. And they will. Arya looked up. What do we do? Robb stared at the sword in his hand. We ride. South. The Raven reached. Ned, as he packed his things, he read the letter. Once then again, it was from Winterfell. Robb was coming, bringing the North with him. He stared at the flames in the hearth. His hand trembled slightly. If Robert saw this as rebellion, there would be blood. If Daenerys landed with dragons, there would be ash and Jon. Where would he stand? Between two worlds, or against both? Back in Essos, Jon walked the deck of the ship under moonlight. The sea was black and still. His heart felt heavier with each wave they crossed. You tried to stop her, Jorah said behind him. That's more than most ever dared. I didn't come to stop a war, Jon said. I came to stop her from becoming what she fears most. And did you? Jon stared at the stars. I don't know. Jorah stepped beside him. You love her, don't you? Jon didn't answer, because the truth was worse. He feared her. Deep in the dungeons of the Red Keep, a blade was being sharpened. Not by a soldier, not by a knight, by a girl with hair, like fire and a name no one remembered. She had been paid in gold, given a target and promised a future. Her dagger was small, but sharp enough to end a bloodline. Jon Snow had stepped into the past to stop a war, but now the war was coming for him. The ship docked in Blackwater Bay under the cover of night. No banners, no horns, just shadows slipping into a city that no longer felt like a capital, but like a trap wrapped in gold. Jon Snow stepped onto the dock with his hood up. The salt air smelled thicker here, like blood buried beneath stone. Jorah followed closely, eyes constantly scanning the alleys, the guards, the glances that lingered too long. Too quiet, Jorah muttered. Even for a city preparing for war. Jon's grip tightened on Longclaw. Someone knows I'm back. They didn't speak again as they made their way toward the Red Keep. Inside the castle, Ned Stark sat in a cold chamber, reading Robb's second Raven letter by candlelight. The northern host was moving fast, too fast. If Robert took this as rebellion, the crown would move first. Blood would spill, and Jon might be caught in the middle. Just then, a guard knocked. "Lord Snow has returned." Ned rose immediately. "Bring him in, alone." Moments later, Jon stepped inside. He looked tired. "Not just in bodies, but in spirit," I told her, he said simply. "All of it," Ned nodded. "And?" "She didn't kill me," Jon said, voice dry. "That's something." He dropped the satchel on the table. Inside, scrolls from Daenerys. Not threats, but visions. Peace offerings. "Her own truth. She'll come," Jon said. "Not with war, not at first. But if Robert moves against her again, she'll burn the whole coast." Ned lowered his head. "Robert's already decided." Jon's face tightened. "Then we're running out of time." Outside, thunder cracked across a cloudless sky. The next day, Robert Baratheon held court. It was not a trial. It was a warning dressed in velvet. "Jon Snow," the king said, his voice heavy with wine and suspicion. "You bring dragons back into the world, and you expect us to trust you." "I bring a choice," Jon answered. "You can end this before the fire spreads." Robert laughed bitterly. "Boy, the fire already has spread." "It's inside you." Jon said nothing. Then Robert looked to his side. "And what of your father, Lord Stark? Still clinging to old oaths?" Ned's voice was steady. "I stand by the truth." "And by my blood." Robert leaned forward, his voice suddenly cold. "Then you're a fool." He stood. "Guards, take Jon Snow into custody." The hall erupted. Robb, who had arrived earlier with a small force under disguise, stood from the benches, his hand on his sword. "You arrest him, you declare war on the north." Littlefinger stepped between them. Now, let's not be hasty." "Enough," Jon said, raising his hand. "Let them take me." Ned's eyes snapped to him. "No, I came here to prevent war," Jon said, staring at Robert. "Not start it." The guards closed in. Robb's men reached for their swords, and then it happened. A girl in servant's clothes stepped from the shadows near the throne. No one noticed her at first, until her blade flashed. It cut through the air like a whisper, straight toward Jon, but it never reached. Jorah Mormont stepped in its path. The dagger sank into his chest. The hall went silent. He gasped, blood spilling from his mouth, and collapsed into Jon's arms. The girl tried to run, but Arya Stark, hidden in the gallery, leapt from above and tackled her to the ground. "She's one of Littlefinger's," Arya hissed, yanking off the girl's veil. Jon knelt beside Jorah, holding him. "Why?" he asked, his voice breaking. Jorah smiled faintly, blood pooling in his beard. "Told you. Someone needed to protect you, from both sides." And then he went still. Jon's hands trembled. The throne room was chaos now. Guards clashing with northern soldiers. Varys trying to calm the court. Littlefinger nowhere to be found. Robert stared at the body, stunned. "Assassins in my hall," he muttered. Ned turned to him, voice ice. "One of yours, Robert." "Bought and paid for." "No," Robert snapped, but his words felt hollow now. "I gave no such order." "You gave the hate," Jon said quietly. "Someone else lit the fire." He stood up, bloody and calm. "You fear dragons," Jon said, "but men are worse." Then he turned and walked out. No one stopped him, not even the king. That night, the Red Keep locked itself behind black iron gates. Ravens flew. Secrets raced faster than ships. Daenerys received the news before the sun rose. Jorah was dead, killed saving Jon Snow. She stared at the letter. No tears came, only fire. She whispered to her dragons. They screamed into the sky, wings spreading like shadows of doom. "Prepare the ships," she said. Missandei looked at her. "What about Jon?" Daenerys turned. "He brought peace once," she said. "Now he'll learn how fragile it is." The dawn over Blackwater Bay glowed red, though no one yet realized it wasn't the sunrise, it was smoke. From the sea came the deep beat of war drums. The sound rolled across the waves like thunder carried by wings. Jon stood on the highest battlement of the Red Keep. Below him, the city stirred in confusion. Bells rang, children cried, and the gold cloaks scrambled along the walls. He could already smell the fire before he saw it. Then far beyond the harbour, he saw her. 3 dark shapes against the sky. Dragons! They're coming, he whispered. Beside him, Robb Stark tightened his gauntlets. His face was pale beneath the wolf-pelt cloak. So that's what they look like, he muttered. Smaller than the stories. They'll grow, Jon said. If we live long enough to see it. Below, Ned Stark was preparing the evacuation of the lower city. He had refused to flee, even when the king himself had barricaded his hall in drunken fear. A lord does not abandon the people who can't run, he had told Jon. If she burns us, we die as Starks. Jon wished he could believe in honor as easily as his father did, across the bay. Daenerys Targaryen stood at the prow of her ship, hair whipping in the wind, the dragons circling above like living storm clouds. Drogon roared, the sound splitting the air. Viserion's wings threw salt spray into flame. The men rowing looked at her not as a queen, but as a goddess. You don't have to do this, Missandei said softly beside her. I do, Daenerys answered. They killed Jorah. They killed the last man who believed I could be more than a monster. You don't know who ordered it. Daenerys' eyes gleamed. I know who lit the fire that burned him. A king who fears the truth. A realm that mocks mercy. She raised her hand. The dragons shrieked as if they felt her rage flow through them. Today they will remember what it means to wake the dragon. In the throne room, Robert Baratheon watched the ships through a window, half drunk, half terrified. She's come, he mumbled. She's bloody come for me. Stannis barked orders to the city watch, while Renly whispered about fleeing. Only Ned stood still. If you'd listened to Jon, this would not be happening. Robert turned on him. And if you'd listened to me, she'd be dead. She's your own blood's daughter, Ned snapped. Rhaegar's child's child. Robert hesitated, the goblet shaking in his hand. Then perhaps it's justice, he muttered. One dragon avenging another. The first blast of heat rolled through the city like a giant's breath. Drogon swooped low, fire spilling across the outer ships of the royal fleet. The harbour erupted. Men screamed as black smoke swallowed them whole. The small folk ran through the streets. Some prayed, some cursed. Jon and Robb charged to the walls with their men. Arrows flew, useless against scales. The dragons passed overhead, a blur of wings and fury. Where's Daenerys? Robb shouted over the roar. Heading for the keep, Jon answered. He could feel her. Some strange pull, half blood, half fate. A second dragon dove toward the wall. Jon yelled for the archers to fall back. The stones shook as fire hit the parapet. Robb grabbed Jon's arm, dragging him away from the collapsing battlement. You can't fight that, Robb shouted. We have to get farther out. Jon's eyes were fixed on the sky. If she burns him, everything ends. Inside the city, Ned led a line of refugees through the gate beneath the keep. Arya rode beside him, sword drawn, eyes wide but fearless. Sansa clutched a child who had lost his mother. The smoke stung, but they pressed on toward the river gate, where northern men waited with wagons. Then came the roar, louder, closer. The dragons were descending. Ned looked back once. He saw the black shapes swooping toward the tower, and he saw Jon leaping from the wall onto a lower roof, running straight toward the dragon. Jon's boots hit the stone, heat licking at his cloak. Drogon's shadow passed over him like night itself. He raised his sword, though he knew it was useless. Daenerys, he shouted, voice raw. Stop! Through the glare of flame, he saw her on the dragon's back. Her eyes met his, rage and heartbreak tangled together. The dragon's throat glowed red, ready to unleash death. Jon dropped his sword and spread his arms. If you kill them, he shouted, you kill me! For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then Drogon's fire burst forth, not at Jon, but into the sky above him, a column of flame that split the clouds. Daenerys pulled the dragon upward, vanishing into smoke. The city trembled. The battle froze. Men stared at the hole burning through the clouds where she had been. When the smoke cleared, Robert Baratheon was gone. Fled or dead, no one knew. The dragons had vanished toward the east. The capital was half ash, half miracle. Many had died, but not all, and Jon Snow stood amid the ruins. His face blackened with soot, his sword lost, his purpose burning inside him. She spared me, he whispered. Ned placed a hand on his shoulder. "No, son," he said softly. "She spared us all." For now, Jon looked east, where the red sky still glowed. He knew this wasn't mercy, it was a warning. The fires in King's Landing smouldered for days. The sky stayed red, even when the dragons were long gone. Ash rained like snow over the ruined streets. Survivors searched the rubble in silence, as if speaking might wake death again. Jon Snow stood atop the walls, staring east. The city behind him was broken, but not destroyed. A mercy bought with blood and silence. Daenerys had come close. "Too close," she held back, Robb said beside him. "Why?" Jon's answer was quiet. "Because I asked her to." Robb shook his head. "And what happens next time? She doesn't care what you ask?" Jon didn't reply. Robert Baratheon had vanished that same night. Some said he fled on a ship wearing servant's clothes. Others claimed he had been killed in the firestorm and his body lost in the harbor. No one truly knew, but with the king gone, the realm began to fracture. The small council collapsed. Houses turned inward. Lords argued over thrones, claims, and titles. Even as the dead were still being buried, Jon walked the ruins with Ned and Robb. Northern soldiers helped dig graves. Sansa helped organize the injured, and Arya trained with the City Watch, preparing for what she called the next battle that's surely coming. There was no victory, only survival. One night, Jon sat alone by the Blackwater, the stars reflected in the water. He held a single letter in his hands, one Daenerys had left behind. The parchment smelled faintly of smoke and dragon leather. "You stopped me once, but you won't always be there. And I don't know if I want to be stopped again." He closed his eyes and felt the weight of it settle on his soul. She had spared him, spared his family, but not out of peace, out of confusion, out of what still lingered between them. But that confusion would not last forever. Weeks passed. The lords of Westeros gathered in the dragon pit, just as they once had after the Great War that never came in this timeline. This time, it was to decide the future. No king, no queen, just ashes and silence. Jon stood in the circle, cloaked in black, silent until he was called. Gendry stood for Storm's End, Jon Royce for the Vale. Sam Tarly, older and wiser, spoke for the Reach. Even Brienne came, not to speak, but to stand witness. Ned Stark stepped forward first. "The North will not bow to a crown of fear," he said clearly. "We'll remain independent if this council becomes another Game of Thrones." There were no arguments. Not anymore. Then Tyrion, who had arrived days before under a white flag, stood. "There is one who did not fight for a throne, who tried to stop all this before it began," he said, nodding at Jon. "He has Targaryen blood, Stark honor, and no desire for power, which is exactly why he should have it," the murmurs began. Some lords nodded. Others muttered about bloodlines and bastards. Jon raised his hand. "No." The room fell still. "I didn't save this realm to rule it. I don't want thrones. I want peace." Jon Royce barked. "Then who would you trust to keep it?" Jon looked around. "Someone who's tasted war. Someone who knows loss. Someone who will listen." He turned to his father. "I nominate Robb Stark as protector of the realm." Robb blinked in shock. "Jon, you led men through fire. You held back when vengeance would have been easy. You saved this city when others wanted to burn it." Jon stepped back. "Let the crown fall to someone who didn't chase it." The vote passed, unanimously. Winterfell prepared for return. Robb would remain in the capital, not as king, but as warden of the realm, a leader without a throne, a protector without a crown. Jon stood with Arya by the gates. "You're not coming home, are you?" she asked. Jon shook his head. "No, I'm going north, beyond the wall." Arya tilted her head. "To hide." "To start again," he said. "No dragons, no politics, just quiet." She didn't press him. "If you find peace, send word. Or don't, I'll know." They hugged and she whispered, "She's still out there, I know. Will she come back?" Jon pulled away and looked to the east. "If she does, I'll be ready." Far beyond the sea, in a forgotten city of stone and fire, Daenerys stood among foreign banners. Her dragons flew overhead, larger now, louder. She no longer smiled, not even when they roared. Missandei stood nearby. You spared him, Daenerys turned. No, she said. I spared myself. She looked at the burning horizon. But next time I won't.